Cool. So welcome, Shaunak, from Instabase.
Hi all, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Hey, so you want to do a quick intro maybe to, I didn't actually do an intro, so by the way, hi, I'm Etienne. Do you want to intro yourself?
Sounds good. Hi, I'm Shaunak. I work at Instabase. I manage the infrastructure team, so all of the SRE team, the platform infrastructure, the cloud architects, the solution architects, etc. That's all about me.
Cool. Awesome. Then let's just dive right in. What does Instabase do? Like, can you tell me something about your use cases, your customers, maybe what kind of milestones you've reached to
Yeah,
this point?
sure. So Instabase's vision is to convert all of your unstructured data into insights instantly. So with that said, what we actually do, we are in the intelligent document processing business today. We help a lot of large enterprises like banks, financial institutions, insurance providers, and even companies like Uber to solve a lot of their automation problems. And we like to do it better and faster. Typically, any kind of automation problem that involve unstructured data fall into some high-level categories, such as extraction or classification or cleaning of data or validating the data, whether the thing that you sort of extracted is accurate or not. You have human in the loop, and you have upstream and downstream integrations. So these are like the sort of like the typical high-level problems. For example, banks have, a lot of you must have filled loan applications at some point. Banks have mortgage underwriting problems where you submit, I don't know, thousands of pages of documents, all in like various like W-2s, tax records, bank statements, pay stubs, identity cards, and whatnot as like a single large docket. And then when the banks get them, their first instinct is to sort of classify them into like different types of documents, which is like the classification step. Then based on the schema of the document, you sort of extract out the information into what you need from the document. For example, from pay stubs, you might need the pay scale. From like the ID cards, you might need the identity of the system, or identity of the user, etc. And then you need to sort of like validate whether things are correct or not. So you must have like a human sort of interaction with the system. So we have like a human in the loop process where you can review whether the data that you extracted is correct or not. And then of course, like you need like downstream integration. So you feed it into their loan processing system, and then the user at the end can make a decision based on what you extracted, whether the data is accurate or not. Similar kinds of problems apply in the insurance space as well, with broker submission reports, where you get like loss reports, or you get schedules of values, or you get like these large broker presentations. The exact same things applies to insurance, and the same applies to companies like Uber, where you have to validate identity cards, like licenses. But the accuracy that is required to do this validation is super high. Like they require of the order of like 95% straight through processing to be able to successfully get value from the platform. So yeah, at Instabase, we sort of help create all of these tools and provide value. Our journey has been very interesting. It's been very typical sort of like AI journey. If you started a company like 2015, 2016, you started with things that have like heuristics, that have constraint-based systems for extraction, etc. Then somewhere around 2018, 2019, the Transformers paper came, changed the world. You move into deep learning, you get data, you annotate it, you create your models, you train, and then all of a sudden, I think November of a couple of years ago, ChatGPT came along, changed the game again, and so you evolve again. And then as part of that evolution, we decided to redo our platform, because now you don't need to worry about like training sets. You don't need to worry about getting like thousands of documents to create that model. A few shot learnings will typically give you all the answers that you need. So we decided to redo our product, and we have a new product called AI Hub, which is where Weaviate came into picture. We built out a RAG pipeline. It wasn't called a RAG pipeline before.
Yeah,
I think
that
that name is very new. But I think like Weaviate helped us a lot because it was our vector database, and of course there were like some constraints because and Weaviate fit all of them really well. But yeah, we changed our solution. Now we have a new product called AI Hub. It's completely self-service to the customers. So a lot of people from like end user customers like students, all the way to like small and medium businesses like startups, all the way to like large enterprises can sort of use our product without much interaction from our side, which has been a huge success for us.
Nice. Yeah, I can totally see how sort of the value that you guys create by just making those processes easier and faster. And if you're aiming for 95% accuracy, that's also really good then, because you can trust that stuff is really good. But yeah, you mentioned industries like banks and insurance. I could imagine that's kind of hard to sell to those kind of industries, right? Like they're probably super regulated. And what are the kind of considerations that you have to do to make it in those kind of industries?
Yeah, okay, now I think this is better. Sorry about that. Yeah, I think the banks and highly regulated industries have the most important concerns that they have is their data. The data is sensitive. The data can only be processed in some certain regions based on the, for example, GDPR. You can only process in European region. Technically, you can process it everywhere, but like the data residency means that you have to keep your data in specific countries. On top of that, a lot of these banks, a lot of these financial institutions or regulated institutions don't even want the data to leave their VPC infrastructure. So you have to create a solution that's actually primed in open source, where you can actually take your solution and deploy on these various customers' infrastructure. They could be on cloud, AWS, Azure, etc., or they could be completely on-prem. OpenShift is a great example of that, where we take our solution and deploy on a couple of like purely VPC'd infrastructure that the banks have created for themselves. So any solution that we needed to use needed to have a lot of backing in open source, needed to be scalable, needed to be reliable. And I think that's, we started to realize that banks or like these financial institutions have started trusting OpenAI a bit. OpenAI is our LLM provider. In addition to that, because OpenAI had a very close partnership with Microsoft, and a lot of these institutions already have close partnership with Microsoft, they're like, okay, you can swap out your OpenAI with Microsoft's OpenAI, and it could work. But still, that didn't solve the problem for us. We still needed to figure out like how to place the data or how to place our software in like different places. But that doesn't solve the problem for like pure on-prem. So we sort of also invested in our own LLMs based on the open source stacks available, like Llama V2s and Mixtral and Mistral, and now we are sort of fine-tuning our own software to deal with this. But yeah, dealing everything in like open source actually makes a lot of sense for us.
Cool. Yeah. Is that like a trust signal to people? As you say, look, this is under the hood. We're using this particular, for example, Weaviate, and you can look at the entire source code. Like if you don't trust us, just
yeah. I think like there is a process in these institutions called model risk management process, MRMs, which means that you have to be able to prove every layer of the stack. How does the request flow, how you make decisions, because at the end of the day, when somebody audits these highly regulated companies, they actually have to be able to prove that the decision that they made did not involve any sort of bias in them. So as part of that, having software that's open source, etc., helps a lot, because you have like a very clear indication of how requests flow through your system, where they sort of went in, what were the decisions made, how they were made, etc. And so the model risk management becomes much easier.
This one's for Weaviate, I guess, the question. Yeah. So the question was for the serverless offering, do you offer different clouds in different regions? Different regions, yes. So regional proximity is something that's always important just for latency and these kind of things. different cloud providers. On the serverless, this is abstracted away. So on the enterprise dedicated, you can say, okay, I want to run on AWS, I want to run on one of the other ones. But for serverless, this is basically an internal optimization that we do where we decide which cloud to pick. Cool, yeah, so speaking of production, you've been in production for quite a while, and I saw when we planned this event, there was an email thread from over a year and a half ago, so I haven't heard from you in a year and a half, and you're in production with Weaviate. I think that's a good sign, yeah. I hope. But yeah, just curious, were there any surprises along your journey, and yeah, how do you just keep up with a year and a half of such a long period, and so much has changed in that time? Like, how do you keep up with the constantly changing landscape of AI?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think let me sort of like try to break that down into two or three problems. So I think let's start with like large enterprises first. I think large enterprises are or have been the most difficult ones to convince to move over to anything. Typically, you see large enterprises, they take like anywhere from like 5 to 10 years to make any sort of like significant change in their process systems. But I think when ChatGPT came along, everybody was very cautiously optimistic about this. Everybody was looking at which is the first mover in this space. And of course, like there were many tools that came along. I think if you look at the document extraction problem itself, when ChatGPT came along, there were like, I don't know, hundreds of products that did like document extraction. But I think like these large financial institutions wanted to figure out a product that hallucinates less, because that is a huge problem with OpenAI. That used to be a huge problem with OpenAI, especially with smaller context windows with GPT 3.5 until GPT 4 came along. So for us, a big surprise was the number of like competitors that we all of a sudden got because of like this new thing. What sort of helped us was that we knew our customers really well. We knew exactly what their use cases were. So we were able to create benchmarks out of it, out of the use cases that we had, so that we could experiment with different types of LLMs, different types of vector databases, different types of RAG systems, I think LangChain, Llama Index, building our own stuff, all of those things we were able to experiment out and see whether our benchmarks on the use case that we really knew provided value to the customer actually beat all of the other systems. And so once we started doing that, we created the product called AI Hub. And then because it was so self-servable, we had our GTM teams sort of reach out to customers directly, saying, hey, here is a product, very easy to create an online account for, go and use it. And I think that helped remove a lot of noise from the system of using our product. And that's how we were able to sort of add a lot of value to these like large enterprises. The second thing that we saw for these large enterprises was they got very comfortable. I think I already talked about the Microsoft partnership. They got very comfortable with Microsoft as being one of the large providers of LLMs. Because Microsoft has been in the enterprise business for a long time. They have been known to have a good handle on security, a good handle on privacy. They're able to provide you with LLMs in your own region that typically like companies like OpenAI don't, et cetera. So, and a lot of these companies already have partnerships with Microsoft. And so they were like, hey, I want to leverage my partnership with Microsoft. And so that was the other sign that we started to see. I think Microsoft also started co-selling AI Hub with us in some cases because they saw a huge value that they could get from adoption. And then the third one was, I think this is the first time we are seeing these large enterprises move faster than ever before. I have seen a few of these banks already have like A100 GPUs running in their clusters, in their data centers. They want to train their own models. They are looking at companies like us to provide them with the tools to fine-tune their models so that it fits their use case. And they are trying to be more experimental than I have ever seen. So that's for the large enterprises. The second thing that we saw is our product typically was very geared to, again, large enterprises like banks, et cetera. And it was very difficult for us to go into the mid-tier, small and medium businesses like startups, like smaller companies, et cetera. But I think LLMs and our product AI Hub, which involves zero-shot learning, you don't have to bring in your own data sets. Everything is very easy to build. A lot of focus was on user experience, etc. Having a lot of focus on that actually helped us quite a bit. Where these small and medium businesses, once we started providing like a small commercial offering, could just use Instabase directly on AI Hub. So now we have about like 30 to 40 small and medium business customers who are actually actively using us or actively experimenting with us month over month, which was a huge traction for us, which we didn't see before. And I think the last one is like the end user customers, which is basically we ran a lot of hackathons in universities in India, where we basically had like 1,400, 1,500 participants come in over like a couple of weekends to experiment out. This was in schools, in law schools in India, where they wanted to figure out like how they could use Instabase for their assignments, or how the professors could use Instabase to generate questions, etc. So we saw a lot of value. We saw a lot of use cases that we never saw before. And we saw the investments in user experience, how that helped shape our product pretty well.
That sounds very familiar. Yeah, that's definitely something that we're doing as well. Yeah, so cool to have you running this long already with Weaviate. I'm super curious. Can you maybe give the audience a bit of a sort of look into how is it that you're using Weaviate? What are you doing with Weaviate? Is there maybe any advice for those who are already using it, or for those who will sort of use it for the first time this afternoon in the workshop?
Yeah, I think the introduction to Weaviate from that email thread that I sent you like maybe like a year ago.
Gone full circle now.
Yes, I think, and I was very happy to see all the slides today around like the multi-tenancy.
Yeah, a lot has happened in that time, right?
Yes, because that was the exact use case that we were trying to solve with Weaviate, which is like having lots of small collections, because that was our use case, but maybe millions of them. And so how would we solve that problem? I think having your team, the partnership with your team initially helped us a lot, because we were able to sort of move very quickly. Even though we did not have a perfect solution, we were still able to, because it's an open source tool, we were still able to figure out like, how can we make it work for our own thing? So we have what we call sort of a rudimentary shard management system. If people are aware, there is a paper by Facebook team called Shard Management, and one of the authors is actually like an employee at Instabase, so he wrote like a very rudimentary shard management system and was able to sort of get Weaviate up and running with some high availability, etc. And of course, like all of the things that you talked about were also what we discovered together at some point. And so thank you for implementing all of this. We will definitely go back and get this back again. But yeah, I think in addition to that, I think Weaviate is a very integral part of our LLM strategy. I think of our RAG strategy as well. I think the most important thing that we saw with Weaviate was that you guys were ahead of the curve when it came to algorithms, when it came to different features. So I think, Bob, you talked about like hybrid search to begin with. I think when we started looking at vector databases back early last year, there was nobody else who was doing hybrid search at that point. And that proved extremely critical for us to be able to launch our product. So thank you for that. Thank you for being a lot ahead of your curve. And I think the most important thing was that we had a long doc problem to solve. We wanted, because small pages, 1-page, 2-page documents, they're all commoditized. If you put them into like OpenAI today, it will give you all the answers. So you want something that differentiates you from the competition. And so our competition was like 1,000-page document, 1,500-page documents. And that's where having something like a hybrid search actually helped us a lot. We were able to figure out like what is the percentage weight of vector retrieval versus token retrieval, etc. I think the other feature that we ended up using and we really liked was your distance metrics, which was again something that nobody had implemented. It was either a 0 or a 1, like it was like pure certainty metric. But I think distance versus certainty, I think like that certainly helped us like evolve our own algorithms, fit our own use cases, etc. So today, I think we are running Weaviate in production for more than a year now. I think as I was mentioning, we have roughly 1,000 weekly active users using our platform, about 5,000 monthly active users using our platform, more than 30 enterprises experimenting with our system at any given point. So we are using sort of like the Weaviate in the multi-tenant mode. But I think our future strategy is to figure out like how we can become the system of insights for larger companies. So where we will sort of have like millions of documents, et cetera, sort of indexed in like one giant collection. And I think we will move our strategy towards that. So we will use Weaviate in like both modes, like the single tenant, very large collection mode, and multi-tenant, many, many, many small collections. In addition to that, I think we have already implemented our high availability solution, so we might want to share some notes there as well on how we can sort of use or how we can contribute back as well on those solutions. In general, I think our journey has been experiment all the time. I think there is some quote, I don't know who it is, but be fearlessly experimental and don't be afraid to change. This is a very evolving market, right? You will see tools coming along every other day at this point. I think there was, the RAG is a new term. RAG 2 just came along yesterday or day before yesterday. Somebody had a paper on it. So things will change. Tools will come along. So know your customers really well. Know your use cases really well. Evolve your use cases. Create benchmarks based on the use cases that you have. Because if you're able to do that, then you will be able to figure out what sort of pipelines, what sort of solutions fit best for you, and you will be able to attack the problem from that side. And of course, like as I said, like don't be afraid to change and use tools that are like a little bit ahead of the curve, right? So we sort of use Weaviate for that, and we have been extremely successful because we bet on something that we knew had an eye on the future.
This is super awesome to hear. I'm really glad that Weaviate can be one of those enablers for you and really get you to achieve your goals. And I think the kind of flexibility and the short feedback cycles and going out there and experiment, this really resonates because there are things like some problems are just software engineering problems that have been solved already, but a lot of the problems have also not been solved yet. And we're getting better, like as an industry, we're getting better at solving these problems every day. And stuff can change so quickly. Like, I saw your reaction to the degrading latency with multi-tenancy. Like 2 years ago or a year and a half ago, that was a serious problem. And right now we're talking hundreds of millions of tenants and these kind of things. So stuff evolves so quick. And for me, it's so nice to sort of, as you say, sort of try and be ahead of the curve and try and identify these problems early, but then also half a year or a year later come back and say like, you build exactly the thing that enabled us to use Weaviate, or that's sort of that's the value that I get out of it for you. It's the business value. You enabled us to achieve our goals using Weaviate, and then that's perfect. That's what a partnership should be like. Yeah, that's really cool. Awesome.
Can you share some of these experiments in your blog?
Do we share our own benchmarks? Yes, we haven't shared it today, but there is a plan for actually writing a few blogs to share our benchmarks, etc. Because it is so targeted for our own use case for like these use cases. I don't know how much of a value it will be, but we have definitely heard from other open source softwares or other like enterprise companies who actually want to use our benchmark, especially because we are one of the leaders in this space. To be able to like fine-tune their own models, etc. So at some point, yes, we will write our own blogs, but it's not there today.
What other technology other than Weaviate would you have used, and why did you prefer this?
Yeah, so I think
what other technologies you might have used other than Weaviate, and why did you prioritize this?
Yeah, so I think when we were using LLMs, when we were creating our own RAG pipeline, one of the most integral parts of it is vector databases. I think there were a few other vector databases that were open source at that point, but the more traditional ones were were hosted, right? They were not like available for you to deploy anywhere. So I think like Weaviate was one of the few ones that was like open source. In addition to that, as I said, like we have our own benchmarks. We ran a lot of performance numbers. We measured like the accuracy, the metrics, etc., that we could get. There were like use cases like hybrid search, distance metrics, distance versus certainty metrics that like really fit our use case well for what we were trying to solve, etc. So the choice was very clear amongst all of these things that we had to go with Weaviate, and that's why we went with it. And that's why we are going to continue with it as well.
There was one thing in there that I really liked, which is that we did our own benchmarks. Because benchmarks is a science, it's an art, and it's also, pardon my words, a lot of bullshit. So if you can do your own benchmarks really on your data and not trust anything that you see sort of the specific vendor or so push one specific benchmark where they just happen to be the best one, and then you go to the next vendor and they happen to be the best one. It's so important to not just because the benchmarks are bad, but also because data sets are different, your use case may be different. Benchmarks always highlight the one thing that one thing is good at, but doing it on your own data is so important. Then also that's the way of how you pick Weaviate, yes, it comes out on top.
Hi. So I wanted to know, talking about benchmarks, so you said you have different use cases for different customers. When you benchmarked these different distance metrics or maybe different vector databases, did you find like one single metric that works for all use cases that you have, or even there you had like different benchmarks for different numbers for different kinds of distance metrics?
Yes, that's a great question. We actually had different benchmarks for different use cases, because not all use cases are alike, right? Like I think the bank submission use case is very different than a driver's license use case, is very different than an insurance use case. Some might require more classification-based results. Some might require like extraction-based results. Some might require like extremely accurate extraction. So the use cases are different. So your benchmarks need to be different. So I think my recommendation would be understand your use cases really well, fine-tune your use cases, and then evaluate different products based on like the different sort of benchmarks that you create.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Can you talk a little bit about your infrastructure itself, like what cloud vendor you have, are there specific services, and how you built it up from a base infrastructure point of view, and how you're scaling it?
Yeah. So Instabase, when we started like long time ago, we started with a philosophy that we don't want to be bought into any cloud vendor. So we picked Kubernetes at that point. It was quite early actually to pick Kubernetes. It was another one of those things which was like ahead of the curve. We picked it. It was the right decision. I think there was a competition at that point with Docker. Docker Swarm was quite famous. ECS was becoming quite famous, but like our investment was we wanted to be something that's vendor agnostic. So we picked Kubernetes as our deployment mechanism or as our infrastructure mechanism. Right now, our own SaaS product that we serve is based out of AWS. AWS has been with you guys. It's been an amazing partner with us. They have been one of the most integral part of our SaaS journey as well. But with a lot of these like large regulated industries, it's very hard for them to fit into like one particular cloud provider. So we right now are hosted on Azure, on GCP, even on-prem using like OpenShift. We are also hosted on, I think this is another cloud called the Pivotal. I forgot which cloud provider, but people have used us in all forms and shapes. But choosing something that's cloud agnostic has not only helped us with making our distribution simpler, but also helped us with like switching the cloud provider. So we went from GCP to AWS about a year and a half ago, and because our infrastructure was like completely generic, it was very easy for us to switch.
Right on time. Thank you, Etienne and Shanak. That was amazing. It's great to hear about actual production use cases, and congrats for being ahead of the curve.